Damascus, 2012. Outside, the civil war is tearing the city apart. The streets are a paranoid war zone under absolute regime control. But inside this 30-year-old barber shop, there is only the smell of talcum powder and the quiet, steady rhythm of scissors snipping through hair. The men sitting in these lever chairs are the colonels and generals running the Syrian war machine. They come here because they've known the barber for decades. As he works, they unbutton their tunics and vent, complaining about the logistics of a war that is grinding them down. They treat the barber like part of the furniture. In that chair, they get careless. They mention troop positions near Aleppo. They complain about clogged supply routes. They drop dates for upcoming offensives, assuming their words vanish with the hair on the floor. At this exact moment, opposition forces and Turkish intelligence are operating in a strategic blind spot. They need high-level movement data, but the regime's inner circle is walled off. Direct infiltration of a general's office is nearly impossible. Foreign intelligence agencies realized this unassuming barber was already inside those walls. They didn't buy his loyalty with cash. They recruited him by showing him that the details he heard could be used to prevent the civilian massacres he watched on the evening news. The barber trained himself using repetition, patterns, and memory techniques that his intelligence handlers taught him. He doesn't write anything down. He can't. It's too dangerous. So he listens, absorbs, and when he's alone, he recalls every detail. Names, numbers, dates, map coordinates, all of it locked in his head. To get the data out, he used analog tradecraft. A simple chalk mark on a specific wall signaled to his handlers that he had intelligence. A few hours later, he would recite the memorized coordinates during a brief, untraceable meeting in the back of a moving car. The intelligence was actionable. Using the barber's descriptions of truck markings and departure times, opposition forces were able to identify and ambush military convoys before they reached their destinations. Initially, his anonymity was his armor. A working man with no political history is invisible to surveillance. But every successful ambush he facilitated provided a new clue for counterintelligence, gradually narrowing the search for the leak. The operation reached its peak when a senior general revealed the details of an imminent chemical weapons strike. The barber memorized the specific units involved and the coordinates for the launch site in a rebel-held suburb. Handlers cross-referenced his report with satellite imagery of the launch site, confirming the threat. This allowed coalition forces to intervene diplomatically, forcing the regime to cancel the operation. In that single suburb, 3,000 people lived through the night because of a conversation in a barber chair. But the Syrian military was tracking the failure of its operations. Over 6 months, 3 major movements had been compromised with surgical precision. The pattern proved that someone with access to high-level briefings was talking. Counterintelligence began profiling the leak. They looked for anyone with intimate, regular access to the general's staff who didn't have a security clearance. This placed the barbershop on a highly restricted watch list. Stopping that chemical attack saved thousands of lives, but it also generated the exact high-value data point the regime needed to identify the source. State security began testing him. They sent an officer into the shop to start a conversation about classified troop rotations. They watched the barber's face in the mirror, looking for any sign that he was paying too much attention. The barber feigned apathy and didn't ask a single question. He technically passed the test, but his total lack of curiosity was unnatural for a man who had known these officers for 30 years. To trained interrogators, his silence was a red flag. The final confirmation came from the outside. Counterintelligence spotted and trailed the barber's handler to a safe house. When they saw the barber arrive shortly after, they had the physical evidence they needed. Realizing he was burned, the barber negotiated 4 days to pack his family for exfiltration into Turkey. But the mathematical decay of his cover had reached its limit. Hours before his departure, state security arrived at his home. He was taken to an underground military prison. Interrogators spent weeks trying to map out his entire network, but the barber had been kept in a strict silo. He had no other names to give them. Shortly before his execution, a smuggled message from his handler reached his cell. It contained just 2 words: "You mattered." It was the only confirmation he would ever receive that his work successfully dismantled the reported operations. The barber vanished, but his case was archived by intelligence agencies. It serves as a study on the mechanics of running civilian assets. The intelligence community studied the operation afterward. The Barber, when the data shows that an asset's cover will inevitably fail, does the chance to save thousands of lives justify putting an untrained civilian in that path? Strategic vulnerability in modern conflict doesn't always come from a digital breach or a satellite photograph. In Damascus, it came from a simple, quiet routine. Just a close shave, a sympathetic nod,